Most of us were surprised Thursday afternoon by the quickness of that guilty verdict in the Trump election corruption trial here in New York. And panel, I am eager to hear your perspectives about what's going to be the reaction in central New York, where in our 5-county area around Syracuse, it's roughly a third Republican, a third Democrat, and a third voters who've not designated a party. So Aaron, what's going to be the impact here?
Well, first of all, I think this is a really big moment for our democracy. I think this is the kind of moment that you will remember where you were. I will always remember that I was coaching my daughter's soccer game when I found out that Trump was guilty on all 34 counts. But I think, political pundits like to talk a lot about verdicts like this, and they're talking about, will Trump be able to vote for himself in Florida if he's a convicted felon or not? I think what matters in central New York is to think about how this is going to play out in our probably pretty tight congressional race. Brandon Williams had a town hall in Clay on Wednesday night before the verdict, right, our congressman. And what did he talk about? He talked about I-81, he talked about Onondaga Lake, he talked about Micron. Who did he not talk about? He did not talk about Trump. And I think what you're going to see in a very close race, where we're now in a district in New York 22 that leans a little bit to the Democratic side, I think you're going to see Republicans shy a little bit away from focusing on Trump and not fully hitch their wagon to Trump when they're out talking in the public. But Congressman Williams has made a lot of statements. He denies elements of the election. I think he is going to hitch himself to Trump when he's talking to his base, but when he's talking to the general public, he's going to shy a little bit more away from Trump on this.
Yeah, I mean, what a stormy week for Trump, right? But, at this, right, I was listening to a lot of news report, and it seems to me that, there is a large number of Republicans for whom the resolve would be more hardened because of this. They would actually find themselves to be more in support of Trump. And primarily because, look, I mean, this was kind of a very obscure legal theory that was used. The person who's prosecuting his predecessor didn't want to do it. And there's already some misinformation going on, right, regarding that, the judge apparently was biased and didn't ask the jury to actually vote unanimously and so on, which is wrong. So, on the whole, I don't know what is going to happen, but I don't think it will take away much of power from Trump, from actually the Trump voters or Trump supporters. But, it was an interesting day to see, that in the United States, at least in some way, the rule of law works, even if it's the President of the United States. But, that opens up a space where a primarily very red county in United States can prosecute, Democratic presidents. So that's also kind of a path that one can.
And rule of law, of course, is very important when we think about the state of democracy. But one thing that concerns me is thinking about our presidential election system as a whole. One of the reasons we didn't begin as a democracy and we had this quirky electoral college created was because the framers were concerned about particularly an individual who might be captivating and generate popular support, but not actually be a sound and competent political leader. And here we are, we saw both Donald Trump and Joe Biden talking about how this fall's election is actually going to determine, who should be president, obviously. And I think that I'm worried about the state of democracy because Trump's following is borderline cultish, where everybody else is the problem and not him. And it's very concerning to me what that might mean when it comes to the election.
Michael, you come from a more Republican county, Cortland County. What's your sense of how this is going to play out?
Well, the fact that so many Americans are still willing to vote for a convicted felon, right? To Aaron's point, this is an American moment, right? And the verdict represents the start, perhaps, of a new American moment in the sense that the president has succeeded in a rather magisterial way in reconstructing the psychological infrastructure of some Americans into a framework of accepting his idea that the rules are there are no rules and those are the rules. That's his idea, that the rules are fallible. They can be broken, and it's regular and it's normal, right? And this goes across demographics, goes across incomes, goes across states, right? His particular species of charismatic populism is one of the most dangerous conceptualizations of influence in the history of the human story. It changes nation states. It It creates the end of empires. It dissolves republics, right? It undermines institutions. And equally important, it separates people from our sense of human decency in civic affairs. And I'm not exactly sure if the conservatives want to admit that their Frankenstein is operating without them or their established principles in place. But a long-range analysis suggests that history will ask one fundamental question, and that question is this: why the Republican Party allowed this to happen to America?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very grave moment also. You know, the most important thing is the absolute election denial. Like, they do not want to, the Republicans, many Republicans do not want to actually concede an election. Trump, I don't think, would concede an election even if he loses in 2025. So this might actually help him in a big way. And also when it comes to sentencing and stuff, right, what is going to happen? He has no criminal record, right? He's an upstanding, so he's the president of the United States. So what would happen? Probation? What does probation look like for, what does community service look like for Donald Trump? And with all that, I mean, if the judge says, hey, do some probation, do something good for New Yorkers, that is actually a good publicity stunt for him. So I think it might be hugely backfiring for the Democrats in many ways. But we will see. And the point well taken. The Trump has reshaped the Democratic Party, Republican Party, in a way that many people don't even want to concede that an election has been, rightly adjudicated. So it's a whole new world for us.
Last word, Aaron.
I think the threat of authoritarian populism is very real, but we have a long history of this country of duels, gunslinging, political violence, terrific corruption. So I think we do want to keep some perspective. This is an American democratic experiment. I'm a scientist, and when you do experiments, they keep going, and this project is going to keep going. We'll see where it takes us. So I think we're right to have a lot of caution, but 12 stone-faced jurors issued a verdict of guilty on 34 counts. That's also a moment of pride I have in American democratic principles and rule of law. To see that happen was pretty impressive.